In this video, we will show how to do the questions in Module 2 of the math portion of the SAT practice test number 3. That test is published by the College Board. You can find the questions in this video by finding the practice test online. The test is published by the College Board. You can search College Board SAT practice test in an internet browser or go directly to the website you see on the screen. A link to this website is in the description of the video. I will also link the PDF of this practice test in the description of the video. Now, when you go to the SAT suite online of the College Board website, you actually get this. So as an update, in February of 2025, practice test number 3 was taken down from this website. You can still find that practice test online, and it is still linked in the description of this video, but it's no longer on the College Board website. So it is linked in this video, and you can download it from there or a number of other places online. When you download that the SAT practice test, it will look like this. It starts out with a reading and writing section. There's a couple of modules on those. And then once you get down to page 30, the math section starts. It starts with module 1 that begins on page 30. And then module 2, depending on how you like to say it, starts on page 40, but the questions start on page 42. The first page has a formula and fact sheet. The second page tells you how to format your answers when you write them down. Then the questions start. So let's go ahead and do these questions. So here we go. Question number 1. Isabel grows potatoes in her garden. This year, she harvested 760 pounds of potatoes, 760 potatoes, and saved 10% of them to plant next year. How many of the harvested potatoes did Isabel save to plant next year? Since she saved 10% of them, we just have to multiply 10% times the number of potatoes that she that she harvested. So 10% of the amount that she harvested will be saved. 10% of 760 is 76. So Isabel saved 76 potatoes. And the answer to question 1 is B, 76. Let's look at question 2. What is the y-intercept of the graph shown? Well, the graph shown is the graph of some equation, I assume. Maybe it's not an equation. But the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So if you look at where this crosses the y-axis, it will have x value of 0. And this graph crosses the y-axis at a y value of 2. So the y-intercept is 0, 2. And therefore, the answer to question 2 is B. Question 3. What length in centimeters is equivalent to a length of 51 meters? 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. The way I like to do this is I like to think of a multiplication by 1. So 51 meters times a fraction that's equal to 1 is going to give my answer in terms of centimeters. If I'm looking for a fraction and we want to cancel out meters and turn it into centimeters, then I got to put the numerator in centimeters, the denominator in meters, and then I put in the equivalent of 1. Since I know that 100 centimeters is 1 meter, I do my multiplication that way, and I end up getting 5,100 centimeters is 51 meters. Essentially, we just multiplied by 100. That means the answer to question 3 is C. 5,100 centimeters is 51 meters. Question 4. A bus is traveling at a constant speed along a straight portion of road. The equation d equals 30t gives the distance in feet from a road marker that the bus will be t seconds after passing that marker. How many feet from the marker will the bus be 2 seconds after passing? So all we have to do is say d is equal to 30t. T is in seconds. D is the distance from the road marker. So the D is going to be 60, and the distance here is in feet. So how many feet from the marker will the bus be 2 seconds after passing the marker? Well, the bus will be 60 feet. Therefore, the answer to question number 4 is C of 60. Question 5. Which expression is equivalent to 20W minus the quantity 4W plus 3W? There's a couple of different ways we could have done this. What I will do is I'll just take 20W and then subtract the simplified version of the interior of those parentheses. The simplified version is 7W inside those parentheses. 20W minus 7W is equal to 13W. Now I know I did this all on one line. You can also do this on multiple lines if you'd like. And the answer is 13W is the equivalent expression. Therefore, B is the correct answer to problem number 5. 13W, which is option B. Question 6. If 6 plus x is equal to 9, what is the value of 18 plus 3x? Now, there's 2 different ways that we can do this. One is we could solve for x, and subtracting 6 from both sides, we get x equals 3, and then I could plug that back in here. So if I wanted to, I could solve for x. I determine x is equal to 3, and then plugging that in to 18 plus 3x, replacing that 3 with a 3, would be 18 plus 9, which is 27. So 27 is the answer if I do it that way. The other way I could have done this is I could have noticed that 6 plus x, if I multiply that left-hand side by 3, if I multiply 6 plus x by 3, that's actually going to give me 18 plus 3x. And so I can take the equation 6 plus x equals 9 and multiply both sides by 3. When you do that, on the left-hand side, you get 18 plus 3x. On the right-hand side, you get 27. And so 18 plus 3x is equal to 27. And again, you can solve that either way. Either solve for x and then plug in x, or notice that 6 plus x times 3 would give you the value you're looking for. So 27 is the answer to number 6. Let's look at question 7. The given equation relates the variables x and y. For what value of x does the y value reach its minimum? Now, this is a quadratic equation, and quadratic equations give you graphs of parabolas. Since the coefficient of the x squared is a 1, precisely a positive 1, I know that we're going to have a parabola that's pointing up when I graph that. So we get a parabola that's pointing up, which means the minimum value is going to happen at the vertex. So let's search for the vertex. Well, the vertex of a parabola has x value, which is always opposite of b over 2a, where b is the coefficient of the x term and a is the coefficient of the x squared term. So in our case, the opposite of b is going to be the opposite of negative 14. 2a is going to be 2 times 1. That's going to be positive 14 divided by 2. That's going to be an x of 7. Now, this is actually the final answer that the question is looking for. It's asking what x value does y reach its minimum? So the x value at which y reaches the minimum is the x value of 7, because that is the x value of the vertex. If I wanted to find the y value of the vertex, I could do that as well by plugging in 7 into this expression of x squared minus 14x plus 22. And if you did that, you would end up with the number negative 27. But again, the question is not asking you for the y value. This question is only asking for the x value, and therefore 7 would be the correct answer to this equation. You do not need to find the y value. So 7 is the correct answer. 7 is the x value of the minimum point. Question 8. Which expression is equivalent to 9x squared plus 5x? Now, what this question is asking you to do is to pull out a greatest common factor. In this case, 9x squared and 5x have a common factor of x. There's no numerical value. There's no integer value that will divide 9 and 5 nicely other than 1. So all we are doing is pulling out the greatest common factor of x, and then we'd be left with 9x plus 5 as the two terms inside the parentheses. And so that's my final answer. X times 9x plus 5 is equivalent to this expression. And therefore, option A is the correct answer to question number 8. Question 9. In triangle ABC, the measure of angle B is 52 degrees. The measure of angle C is 17 degrees. What is the measure of angle A? So this is a problem that's asking us about angles of a triangle, ABC. If you look on your formula sheet on the practice test, you see that the last line says sum of measures in degrees of angles of a triangle is 180. Therefore, we're going to use that fact. We're going to say angle A plus angle B plus angle C has to add up to be 180 degrees if all these things are in degrees. So A plus 52 plus 17 is equal to 180. 52 and 17 is 69. So A plus 69 is equal to 180. And then subtracting 69 from both sides gives me that angle A has to be 111 degrees. So angle A has to be 111 degrees. Therefore, option D is the correct answer for problem number 9. Question 10. The graphs of equations in the given system of equations intersect at point x comma y. What is the value of y? We have two equations. The first one tells me the value of x, basically. It says x is equal to 8. So any point which is a solution to this system will have x value of 8. In order to find the y value, we use y equals x squared plus 8, and then substitute in the 8 for the x. So we get 8 squared plus 8. And if you calculate that, that y value is going to be 72. So the solution to this system is 8 comma 72. This is only asking me for the y value, and therefore the y value is 72 is my final answer. So D is the correct answer to question 10. Question 11. The scatter plot shows the relationship between two variables x and y. A line of best fit is also shown. Which of the following equations best represents the line of best fit shown? So let's examine this line. The two big things are that it has negative slope because as you move left to right, the line is moving down. And it's intersecting the y-axis at a little above 13. So the y-intercept is going to be 0, comma, something a little above 13. So that's what we need. We need a line with something that's a little above 13 as my y-intercept. So y equals mx plus b. B needs to be a little above 13. So my options here that they're giving me are either a positive 13.5 or a negative 13.5. So that means we want positive 13.5. And then, like I said, the slope is negative. The only option it gives me is 0.8. So we're going to take negative 0.8 times x plus 13.5. Slope is negative, crosses at 13 and a half. And you can reorder that in whatever way you want. The way they have it written here is option B. So option B of a positive 13.5 minus 0.8 is the correct answer to question 11. So B is the correct answer. Number 12. The function f is defined by f of x is equal to 8 times the square root of x. For what value of x does f of x equal 48? Excuse me. So what we need to do is to realize if we want the output of that function to be equal to 48, all we have to do is set 8 square root of x equal to 48 and then solve. So the square root of x is going to be equal to 6. That's what I get when I divide both sides by 8. And then to undo a square root, we're going to square both sides. When you square a 6, you end up with 36. And that's the final answer. X is equal to 36. It's asking for the value of x that makes this makes f of x equal to 48. So looking at option C, 36. Question 13. A circle has center O and points R and S lie on the circle. In the triangle ORS, the measure of angle ROS is 88 degrees. What is the main angle measure of RSO in degrees? So I always like to have a picture when I encounter something like this. I'm going to go ahead and draw that picture and paste it in to this document. So here is that picture. Our angle at O, the ROS, is 88 degrees, and the angle at R, the ORS, is going to be X. Now, because this is based on a circle, and O is the center of that circle, the length of O to R is going to be the same as the length of O to S. And therefore, we have an isosceles triangle. So not only is this angle X, but also the angle at S is X as well. And just like before, we know the three angles of a triangle are going to have to add up to 180 degrees. So X plus 88 has to be 180. Combining the X's together, X plus X is 2X. And then subtracting 88 from both sides gives us 2x is equal to 92. Dividing by 2, you get that angle x is equal to 46 degrees. And if x is equal to 46 degrees, then RSO angle is also equal to 46 degrees because we have an isosceles triangle. Therefore, 46 is the answer. 46 degrees is the answer to question 13. Question 14. What is the sum of solutions to the given equation? So we're going to have to solve this given equation and then find the solutions and then add them together. So this equation, when I multiply things out, becomes x squared plus 1x minus 56 is equal to 4x squared minus 28x. So what I can do is I can subtract one way or the other. Let me do this. Let me subtract the 4x squared from both sides and add 28x to both sides. If I subtract 4x squared, I end up with negative 3x squared plus 29x when I add 28x to both sides, and then minus 56. If you don't like the negative 3, and on the right-hand side, we get 0, sorry. If you don't like that -3 out in front, you can multiply both sides of the equation by a negative sign, and that will just change all of the signs of the terms in this example. Now, here's what we'll do. We'll factor the left-hand side of the equation. It's going to be 3x plus a number, and then just x plus a number. They're both going to have to multiply to give me 56, but add to get together so that the middle term matches up. So you can guess and check. If you know how to do the AC method, you can do that one as well. But it turns out that when we do the calculations, we end up with a 3x minus 8 and an x minus 7. You need a -7 and a -8 if I want to multiply and give positive 56. And then if you look at what's happening, this is going to be 3x times -7 and then a minus 8x. That's -21x minus 8x is -29x. Again, I'm not showing the methods of factoring too deeply in this video, but if you want to, you can check out some other videos on factoring. Now we can say, since the right-hand side is equal to 0 and the left-hand side is factored, either 3x minus 8 is going to be 0, or x minus 7 is going to be 0, because the only way I can get a 0 is when I multiply 0 times itself, or 0 times something. So now we'll solve. Add 8 and divide by 3, you get x is equal to a positive 8/3, or x is equal to, when you add 7 to both sides, you get 7. When you add those solutions up, you'll get the sum. Remember, 14 isn't asking for the specific solutions, it's asking for the sum of the solutions. And the sum is what you get when you add those up. So we'd add up 8/3 and 7. And when you do that, 8/3 plus 7/3. 7/3 is 21/3. So 8 plus 21 is 29. And you'd get 29/3 as a improper fraction. That's one of the legit ways to write your answers. You can also divide, get a decimal version of the answer, and then truncate it to 4 characters or 5 characters. But we already have 29/3 as 5 or less characters, so that's what I put in for the answer on question 14. Question 15. The solution to the given system of equations is x comma y. What is the value of 5x? Now, again, there's a number of different ways you can solve this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use substitution. Since on the first equation, we already have y equals 3x, I'm going to use substitution, and instead of that being a y in the second equation, instead of 2x plus y equals 12, now I substitute out the y for a 3x. So I end up with 2x plus 3x is equal to 12. And sure enough, 2x and 3x add together to give you 5x. And that's the value we were looking for. The answer is 12. 5x is equal to 12, and therefore option C is the correct answer for problem 15. Problem 16. A cube has an edge length of 41 inches. What is the volume in cubic inches of the cube? So this is on the formula sheet as well. Cube is that rectangular brick shape object. And on the formula sheet, it says take the length times width times height to give the value. Well, in a cube, the length, width, and height are all the same. So I can think of that as the width times the width times the width, or the side length times the side length times the side length, which is 3s. Since, or did I say 3s? S to the third power, excuse me, side length to the third power. Since the volume is going to be length times width times height, and they're all going to be the same, side length to the third power, I can calculate the volume of this cube by taking the 41 inches, which is all the edges, and multiplying it times itself 3 times. So 41 raised to the third power. And there you go. 41 raised to the third power is going to be my answer. And that, by the way, is 68,921. So 68,921 is the volume of the cube in cubic inches. Therefore, option D is the correct one. Question 17. The given function P models the population of Lowell T years after a census. Which of the following functions best models the population of Lowell M months after the census? So here's the interesting thing that we're going to do. If I have a number of years and I multiply that by 12, that gives me how many months we've covered. So 12 times the number of years is equal to the number of months. So if we had 1 year, we'd have 12 months. If we had 2 years, we'd have 24 months. And therefore, what I can do is just divide both sides by 12. T is equal to M over 12. And then I'll just substitute that out in this model, substitute out the T in that model. We end up with a function R of M. So that's the population based on the number of months. We'd take the 90,000 times 1.06 and we'd raise it to the T power. But because T is in years, we change it to in months. In months, T is equal to M over 12. So M over 12 is my exponent. And that's it. That's the answer to question 17. We're looking for this function. That function is obviously option D. So option D is the correct function. That's question 17. Question 18. The solution to the given system of equations is x comma y. What is the value of y? We're going to solve this system of equations, and we're going to solve it by elimination method. You could use other methods as well. What you would do is you would keep the first equation the same, and then you would multiply that second equation on both sides by a -3. If I did that, 2x times -3 gives me -6x. 2y times -3 would give me a -6y. And 10 times -3 would give me a -30. Now what can happen is I can use the elimination method because I have opposite coefficients on the x's, and I can simply add these two equations together. When I add these two equations together, I'll get 1y is equal to -2, or y equals -2. And that's actually all we need to do to answer question 18. It's asking the solution is x comma y, what's the value of y? I know that the y value for the solution now has to be -2. If you wanted to plug in -2 into one of these two equations and solve for x, you could also find the x value, but there's no need in this problem. Y equals -2 is the solution, and therefore option A is the correct answer to question 18. Question 19. The minimum value of x is 12 less than 6 times another number n. Which inequality shows the possible values for x? So the minimum value for x, we're going to have x and then some relation. I'll just write ... for now. The minimum value is 12 less than 6 times another number. Whenever you do 12 less, you're going to be subtracting 12 from something. 6 times another number is 6n. So we know it's going to be x some relation to 6n minus 12. The minimum value of x is that. That means x could be bigger than that. So if the minimum value is 6n minus 12, that means the x could be bigger than that value. So we have to make our expression x greater than or equal to 6n minus 12. And that's option B. So the answer to question 19 is B, x is greater than or equal to 6n minus 12. Question 20. Data set A consists of heights of 75 buildings and has a mean of 32 meters. Data set B consists of the heights of 50 buildings and has a mean of 62 meters. Data set C consists of the heights of the 125 buildings from data set A and data set B. What is the mean in meters of data set C? So what we could do is we could calculate the mean using the data set A and data set B numbers. Now, think of adding up all of the heights of the buildings in data set A. Since the heights average 32 meters and there are 75 buildings, the total heights of buildings in data set A is going to be 32 times 75. In a similar manner, in data set B, we have 50 buildings, and those have an average height of 62 meters. So if I take 62 meters and multiply by 50 buildings, I'll get the total of sum of all the heights of the buildings in data set C. If I add those two numbers together, I get the total heights of all buildings added up in data set C, which is the combined A and B. Then, if I'm trying to find the average, I divide by 125. So all I have to do is calculate this out. The numerator becomes 5,500. The denominator is 125. And we get that 44 meters. is the mean height of data set C. What is the mean in meters of data set C? 44 is the correct answer. So that's how we do problem 20. Problem 21. The graph of 9x minus 10y is equal to 19 is translated down 4 units in the xy plane. What is the x-coordinate of the x-intercept of the resulting graph? You can do this again in a number of ways, but what I would do is I would say if we are translating down 4 units, we take 9x minus 10 and we replace the y with a y plus 4. That's how we translate down. We add 4 to the y. And then I'd simplify that. So we would end up with 9x minus 10y minus 40 is equal to 19. Adding 40 to both sides gives 9x minus 10y is equal to 59. Now we're talking about the x-intercept. Remember that the x-intercept happens when y is equal to 0. So now that I have my equation of translated down 4 units, I take and plug in a y of 0. That would give me 9x minus 10 times 0 equals 59. And then I'm going to solve for x. So 9x is equal to 59. Divide both sides by 9 and you get x is equal to 59 over 9. Now, if you read the directions on the SAT practice test, they say you can write your answer if you want as an improper fraction, so long as it doesn't contain more than 5 characters. This does not contain more than 5 characters, so this would be the solution to question 21. If you wanted to write as a decimal, then it tells you to write your answer if you're writing as a decimal with 5 characters or 4 characters. Let me look actually. So yeah, this one right here, it says if your answer is a decimal that's too long, which means over 5 characters for positive number, truncate it or round it at the 4th digit. So the 4th digit, we'd be rounding it to. And this says if you have a mixed number, write it as an improper fraction, making sure that the improper fraction is not too long over 5 characters. So I would leave it as 59 over 9. If somebody really wanted to write as a decimal, then you'd round it to 6.556. That's 4 characters long there, 6.556. So there you go, 6 digits, or excuse me, 4 digits. My bad, 4 digits. But again, I would leave it as 59 over 9. That's a little bit easier to deal with. So 59 over 9 is the answer to question 21. Question 22. Two variables x and y are related such that for each increase of 1 in the value of x, the value of y increases by a factor of 4. When x is 0, y is 200. Which equation represents this relationship? So each increase of x by 1, the y value increases by a factor of 4. So increasing by a factor of 4 means you're multiplying by 4. So as x goes from 0 to 1, that's a multiplication by 4. As x goes from 1 to 2, that's a multiplication from 4 to 4 squared. And if we go up to 4, x goes from 2 to 3, then we're at 4 to the third, then we're at 4 to the fourth when x goes to 4. So in other words, sorry. So in other words, we're getting this repeated multiplication by 4 over and over and over, which is going to give me 4 to the power x at some point with my equation. Now, it also says when x is 0, y is 200. That means that 200 is the coefficient of this equation. So we have 200 times 4 raised to the x power. When x is 0, this 4 goes away, and you just get y equals 200. It goes away because it becomes 1. 1 times anything is itself. So this is the equation that we're looking for, and therefore the answer to question 22 is D. Question 23. One solution to the given equation can be written as 1 plus square root of k, where k is a constant. What is the value of k? This is a quadratic equation in one variable, which already is set up as ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. In that case, I can find the solutions for x by using the quadratic formula, which is opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Again, b is the coefficient of the x term. So when we say opposite of b, that's going to be the opposite of -2. Let's do this way. And then I have plus or minus a square root. B squared is -2 squared. Make sure that negative is in the parentheses. Minus 4 times a times c. Well, a is the coefficient of x squared. In this problem, that's 1. C is going to be my constant, which is -9. And then over 2a. I've already established that a is 1. So then we can simplify that. What we end up with is 2 plus or minus the square root, and that is the square root of 40 over 2. We can simplify that. I'll do that on the same line. That's going to be 2 plus or minus the square root. Think of 40 as 4 times 10. When you think of it that way, the square root of 4 can jump out of the square root and become a 2. Square root of 4 is 2, and that's what we get. So we're saying that x could be 1 plus or minus 1 times the square root of 10, dividing both of these terms by 2 gives me 1 plus or minus square root of 10. 1 plus square root of 10 is one answer. 1 minus square root of 10 is the other. So clearly, if we're saying that one solution can be written as 1 plus square root of k, that means that the 1 plus square root of 10 is the thing I'm looking for. And k, therefore, would be equal to 10. So 10 is the answer to question 23. So B, option B, is the correct answer. Question 24. The dot plots represent the distributions of values in data sets A and B. Which of the following statements must be true? The median of data set A is equal to the median of data set B. Well, if you notice, and the standard deviation of data set A is equal to the standard deviation of data set B. If you notice, both of these data sets are symmetric about the number 13. So if you look on your left and right, if you draw a straight line, vertical line, through 13, you'd see symmetry on the left and right hand side of that line. That's for both data sets. So there's symmetry in these data sets. And so that means the median is going to be 13 for data set A, and the median is going to be 13 for data set B. That's a feature of symmetric data sets. You could also, if you wanted to, just calculate it. It's not very hard, but the median is the same for A and B. So one is true. Now let's think about the standard deviation. Okay. Basically what we have, the difference between data set A and data set B is it's like we took my 2 points, which were right in the middle here at 13. Let me actually erase that line. So it's like I took this point here and this point here, and instead of putting them in the middle, I took them to the sides. And that would have given me data set B. That means these 2 points are have been spread out. Anytime we spread out a data set, we increase the standard deviation. Therefore, the standard deviation for data set B is going to be higher than the standard deviation for data set A because I spread out the points. So while 1 is true, the median is the same, 2 is not. Therefore, the answer to question 24 is A. So option A is the correct answer. 1 is true, but 2 is not. So the only statement that's true is 1. And that's how to do 24. A is the correct answer. Question 25. An isosceles right triangle has a perimeter of 94 plus 94 root 2 inches. What is the length in inches of one leg of this triangle? So the perimeter obviously is the sum of the outside lengths of the 3 sides of the triangle. Let's go ahead and draw this so that we can see what's going on. So since we have a right triangle, which is isosceles, I've got these 2 legs have to be the same, and the hypotenuse is obviously going to be different, but the 2 legs are going to be the same. And I'm going to first figure out what the hypotenuse is in terms of x. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this. One is you can use the Pythagorean theorem that says when we have a right triangle, the lengths of the legs squared summed up is equal to the length of the hypotenuse squared. So we get x squared plus x squared is equal to c squared. And that means that 2x squared is equal to c squared. And that would mean that c is equal to the square root of 2x squared. Since that x squared is underneath the square root and we're talking about lengths always, I can take the x on the outside. So you can get x times square root of 2 is the length of c. So that's one way you could figure that out if you want. Use the Pythagorean theorem. By the way, the Pythagorean theorem is in the formula section of the practice test. Now, the other way also happens to be in the formula of the practice test. If we have an isosceles right triangle, then that's one of these special right triangles. And so you could have seen that if we had side length, leg length S and leg length S, then our hypotenuse would have been S times square root of 2. That's exactly what we figured out with the Pythagorean theorem as well. But that's your three sides. We called it X, X, and X root 2. Here we have S, S, and S root 2. Now we know the perimeter in terms of X. The perimeter has to be all of the side lengths. That's X plus X plus X times the square root of 2. X plus X can be combined to give me 2X. And that's what I get. By the way, we can also rewrite that in other ways as well. But my question said 94 plus 94 root 2 inches is the perimeter. So I know that 94 plus 94 times the square root of 2 is equal to that perimeter of 2x plus x times the square root of 2. Now this almost looks like the same thing. You'd hope that x would have been 94, but that is not the case because 2x is not 94 when x is 94. So to solve this, what I'd have to do is I'd have to take this 94 plus 94 times the square root of 2. And I'm going to eventually divide that. And what am I going to divide that by? Well, factor out the x. You would get 2 plus the square root of 2 times x. So one leg of the right triangle is the x. Therefore, if I divide both sides by 2 plus root 2, I'm going to find the value of x. So that's all we have to do. 94 plus 94 times the square root of 2, divide that by 2 plus the square root of 2. That's the value for x. Now, at this stage, you may look at that and say, well, that doesn't match the form that I'm given here. And it doesn't. So what we would do is we would rewrite that. Well, there's a couple of different options. You can rewrite this so that you simplify it to one of these forms. Or what you could do is you could figure out what numerical value this thing is and then match it to the numerical value up here. I'm going to do this the long way. The short way is probably look at the numerical values, but I'm going to do this the long way. And I'm going to actually take 94 plus 94 times the square root of 2. And I'm going to simplify. I'm going to divide by 2 plus the square root of 2. If you do that, the way to actually do the division is to do multiplication by 1. And in this case, you use the conjugate. So we're going to take 2 minus the square root of 2 and multiply that on top and bottom. And I'm just going to go ahead and simplify that. So I'll do the simplification steps. I have already done them, so without putting a lot of time on this video, we're going to take 2 times 94, 94 root 2 times 2, 94 times square root of 2, 94 root 2 times 2, and that's all going to be in the numerator. I guess I will write the steps. So we end up with 188, that's 94 times 2. 94 times negative root 2 is minus 94 square root of 2. 94 root 2 times 2 is a positive 188 times the square root of 2. And then 94 root 2 minus times negative root 2 is going to be 94 times root 2 times root 2. That's a minus 188. Notice that that's going to cancel out the other 188, and that's a really nice thing. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times negative square root of 2 is minus 2 square root of 2. And then we do square root of 2 times 2, which is a positive 2 root 2. And then square root of 2 minus the square root of 2 is a minus 2. So all of that simplified would give us a fraction, which is 94 times the square root of 2, all divided by 2. And so 47 times the square root of 2 is your final answer. Like I said, this is the side length of one of the legs of the isosceles right triangle. 47 times square root of 2. It might have been quicker just to calculate whatever this number is on your calculator, get a decimal value approximation, and then match it up to the 47 root 2. But in any case, the answer to question 25 is B, which is 47 times the square root of 2. All right. Question 26. In the given equation, C is constant. The equation has exactly one solution. What is the value of C? There's a couple of different ways I can do this. I'll show you two options, and they'll both come out the same way. So the first one is the following. This is a quadratic equation, set equal to 0. If I want one solution, I really want a quadratic to look like x minus or plus some value squared set equal to 0. That's the situation which I'm going to get one solution. So I need to transform that quadratic equation into one that looks like x minus a value squared equals 0. Well, I can do that. I can take negative 9x squared plus 30x plus c, set that equal to 0. One side is already 0, so that's nice. And I can try to turn in the left-hand side into x minus the value squared. So the first thing I would do is divide everything by a negative 9. We would end up with x squared minus 10 thirds times x plus c over negative 9 or minus c over 9. And then if I divide the left-hand side by negative 9, I have to divide the right-hand side by negative 9 as well. That's all right though. 0 divided by negative 9 is still 0. So this means that x minus v squared, whatever that value is, needs to look like x squared minus 10 thirds x minus c over 9. If you know how to complete the square, you know what's going to happen. If you take x minus v squared, we're going to get x squared minus 2v times x. And then you're going to get plus v squared equals 0. Well, this tells you what v has to be. Because 2v has to be 10/3. This tells me that the v, the value, whatever it is going to be, has to be 10/6. So the value of v has to be 10/6, and I'm going to need x minus 10/6 as that completing the square. Now, when I square that, 10/6 squared becomes this v squared portion. That's going to be 100/36. I know I'm not simplifying that right now. So as long as we have this situation, the left-hand side is going to be x minus 10/6 squared, which is x squared minus 10/3x plus 100/36 is equal to 0. Well, that means that minus c/9 has to be the same thing as 100/36. So we get negative c/9 is equal to 100/36. And this will allow me to figure out what the value of c is that I want. You can cross multiply. I will take negative c times 36, that's negative 36c, set equal to 900, and then divide both sides by a negative 36. 900 divided by negative 36 is a negative 25, so c is equal to negative 25. And that's it. That's what we have. Negative 25 is the solution to problem 26. So that's option 1, realizing what one solution means. One solution means I can factor one side as x minus a value squared equals 0. Now, the other option that we can use is we can think of this being the output of a quadratic equation of a parabola. We can think of this as y equals negative x squared plus 30x plus c. And in order for this to have one solution, basically we need the vertex of that parabola to just touch. In order for this equation to have one solution, we need the vertex of this parabola to have y value of 0. So the vertex of that parabola having y value of 0 makes it one solution, makes this quadratic equation have one solution. And the vertex has x value of opposite of b over 2a. B is the coefficient of the x term, so that's going to be the opposite of 30, so negative 30, over 2 times a, which is negative 9. So we take 30 over, negative 30 over negative 18, and that's 5/3. So I know that the vertex is going to have x value of 5/3. And I want it to be such that when we're at the vertex, which has x value of 5/3, the y value has to be 0. So I want the x value to be 5/3 when the y value is 0. And therefore, I can plug in 0 for y and 5/3 for x into this equation. So we end up with 0 equals negative 9 multiplied times 5/3 quantity squared plus 30 times 5/3 plus c. And then do the calculations. 0 equals, when we do negative 9 times 5/3 squared plus 30 times 5/3, you actually get a 25. So we end up with 25 plus c is equal to 0. Subtracting 25 from both sides gives me that the c value would have to be negative 25. So this is another option for finding the value of c, which makes this equation have one solution. You can use completing the square like we did earlier, or you can think of this as the output of a quadratic equation in two variables and figuring out that the vertex has y value of 0 when this equation has one solution. So negative 25 is the correct answer, and that is option C. Question 27. We have two equations which involve both x and y. In the given system of equations, p is constant. If the system has no solution, what is the value of p? Now, if you look closely here, no solution would mean that these two equations yield parallel lines. So both of these are linear equations, I should say. So no solution happens when these lines are parallel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite some of these. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take my first equation and I am going to add 3/2 to both sides, and then I'll add 1/4 x to both sides. If I add 3/2 y to both sides, I end up with 3/2 plus 3/2, which is 3y, is equal to positive 1/4 times x plus 2/3. That's what I get when I add 3/2 y to both sides and then add 1/4 x to both sides. In my second equation, what I would do, let's actually do this. I'm going to get y on the left-hand side. I'm actually going to leave the py alone. Plus 9/2. Set that equal to 1/2 plus 3/2. 1/2 x plus 3/2. So what I've done there is I've just flipped the sides. And then I'm going to add 9/2 to both sides, or excuse me, subtract 9/2 to both sides. So I've flipped which side's on the left, which side's on the right, and now I'm going to subtract 9/2 from both sides. When I subtract 9/2, 3/2 minus 9/2 becomes a -3. Now, parallel lines are such that they have the same slope. Okay. If I want to find the slope of this first line, there's a couple ways I can do it. I can divide both sides by 3. That's the way I'm going to do it. You can use some other tricks as well. So if I divide both sides by 3 on the first line, I get y equals 1/12 x plus 2/9. In the second equation, I end up with dividing, I will end up dividing p on both sides. And so I'd get y is equal to 1/2p times x minus 3/p. Now the intercepts aren't going to be a problem. All we're going to do is make sure that these lines have the same slope. And if these lines have the same slope, then 12 is equal to 2p. So 1/12 is equal to 1 over 2p, which means that 2p is equal to 12, which means that p is equal to 6. Again, the intercepts don't matter. I just know they're parallel lines. As long as they're not the same line, and 2 over 9 is not the same thing as negative 3 over 6. So p is equal to 6 forces these lines to have the same slope, and therefore forces these lines to be parallel. Therefore, if we want no solution, we need to make the value of p 6. So the answer for problem 27 is 6. That concludes Module 2 of the SAT Practice Test number 3. There's a link to an explanation of solutions to the Module 1 of this practice test in the description of this video. There's also a link to a playlist where Modules 1 and 2 of the other SAT practice tests as well in this video. So that link to the playlist is in this video as well, or in the description of the video. Lastly, if you are planning on taking the SAT soon, good luck. I hope this video helps.